If the medical experts say the vaccine is safe, then I believe them.
If the FDA and CDC give sign-off, the vaccines could be available next week. Funerals continue in Uvalde, Texas, for the victims of last month's school shooting. That tragedy may have caused a change in attitudes about gun laws in Texas, says ABC's Jim Ryan in Dallas.
The latest Quinnipiac University poll conducted last week found that 51% of Texas voters think that stricter gun laws would help to reduce the number of mass shootings, while 47% do not. On specifics, nearly three-quarters of Texans support raising the minimum age for gun purchases to 21, but they're evenly split on the idea of a nationwide ban on the sale of assault weapons.
Today's January 6th committee hearing expected to focus on pressure placed on Vice President Pence to reject the Electoral College count, and FIFA will announce which cities in the U.S. will host games in the 2026 World Cup today. You're listening to ABC News.
If you owe the IRS back taxes, then get ready to pay up. The IRS has giant private collection agencies actively tracking down folks who owe the IRS. So if you think dodging them was stressful in the past, it's going to get a whole lot tougher. Optima Tax Relief has this advice. Don't wait. Solve your tax problems now before it's too late. Optima Tax Relief works to stop the demand letters, stop the aggressive collection actions, and stop the IRS collectors from targeting you. Ask Optima about the Fresh Start Initiative, one of the biggest breaks the IRS has ever offered. If you qualify, you could save thousands, and nobody knows this program better than they do. Optima is A+ rated with the Better Business Bureau, and they get results, having resolved over $1 billion of tax debt for their clients. Get a fresh start. Call today for your free consultation.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
American forces launching an operation into northwestern Syria, where the Pentagon says those forces captured a key ISIS leader. ABC's Cecilia Vega's at the White House with details.
His name is Hani Ahmed al-Kurdi. Officials say he was an experienced bomb maker and a facilitator. He was actively planning ISIS operations. U.S.-led coalition forces capturing him during this rare military operation there in northwestern Syria yesterday. They say no civilians were harmed or damage sustained to any U.S. resources during this raid.
Elon Musk is set to address Twitter employees today in a meeting, his first since he put in a bid of $44 billion to buy the company outright and take it private. But lately, Musk has raised questions about the deal over the number of fake accounts that he claims to be on Twitter, workers there getting an opportunity to send in questions ahead of time. Outside of a court in London this morning,
keep moving! Keep moving!
Crowds around actor Kevin Spacey as he went in to face charges of sexual assault against 3 men. Spacey denied all charges. He was granted unconditional bail. Cosmetics giant Revlon has filed for bankruptcy. The 90-year-old company citing a heavy debt load, surging costs, and supply chain problems, but says it plans to keep operating. Ferrari is speeding up its electric plans. The car maker now says by 2026, 60% of its new models will either be full electrics or hybrids. This is ABC News.
70% of the Fortune 100 choose Zoom. With phone, chat, workspaces, apps, events, and video in a single platform, Zoom powers all your communications. Large enterprises, small businesses, and individuals use the secure Zoom platform to enable new ways of working, learning, hosting events, and supporting their customers. And now you can save 15% on meetings, chat, and phone with the Zoom United bundle. Visit zoom.com/bundle. Zoom, how the world connects.
Brian Clark, ABC News.
We've got 2 more days of excessive heat and humidity. Then a cold front comes on by tomorrow night. That will bring cooler and less humid air for the weekend. And I think the best day will be Father's Day. So partly to mostly sunny skies today. Looking out, watching out for late day and evening storms that could be strong. The high in the low to mid-90s. Those storms last into the evening. The low in the upper 60s to low 70s. And then partly to mostly sunny. Hot for your Friday. The high temperature in the low 90s. I'm Mike Mays in the Weather Center.
Currently 77 degrees here in Rutherford and warming up. Well, the heat index possibly up today to around 103 possibility with that heat index. So let's might as well accept that fact and do the best we can with this hot weather until it gets a little winter time here coming up in a few months. 9:05 right now.
It's time now for My Great America with Jim and Butch, a conversation about positive things about this great country. And now here are Jim and Butch.
And good morning, everybody. It's 9:06. Welcome to My Great America with Jim and Butch. And my traveling friend is traveling again this morning. Good morning, traveling friend. Where are you?
Good morning, Jim. I am actually at the Charlotte Airport. I'm on my way to Nashville in about an hour and a half, and I'll be going to the Faith and Freedom Road to the Majority 2022 event there. Lots of incredible speakers. They just confirmed that number 45, Donald Trump, will be the keynote speaker on Friday. There are people like Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Marsha Blackburn, lots of senators, congresspeople, and others. So it's been a couple of years in a row since my conversion to becoming a Republican that I've been going to this event. I'll be there doing some interviews with different folks. So I actually, Jim, have WCAB media credentials along with folks from Fox and One America and others. So I have to tell you one quick funny story. So last year, you've already heard me say this, but our listeners haven't. Last year I was up there in Media Row, and I'm with all these secular media entities and a couple of religious broadcasters as well. And so I'm talking to the guy from Fox, and I introduced myself, and he tells me, he's with Fox, and he says, now where are you from? I said, well, WCAB, My Great America. And he looked at me in the eyes and said, yeah, that's right. So I just thought that was great. So we're here flying the flag for Rutherford County and for WCAB and for My Great America. So my hope is to come back with some audio interviews that we'll be able to pull together and use in an upcoming program.
Sound like some great speakers. Save my seat.
Well, and you know what? You're always here in spirit, and you and I have talked about this before. Whenever one of us goes someplace, we bring the station, and we also bring the friendship and kinship and My Great America wherever we go. But I found myself thinking this morning, Jim, about all the airports I've been at through the years. People have heard me say there's no honor in this, but it's over 4 million miles, air miles, that have been traveled, and every inhabited continent, 104 countries. But I grew up in an aviation home, and of course, North Carolina has the incredible and unique history. December 17th, 1903, right there, Kitty Hawk, Orville and Wilbur Wright launched what has become a revolution, and every day around the world, millions of miles flown by countries, airlines, and international airlines. So today I'm just on a little hop, skip, and a jump. I think it's 356 miles to Nashville.
It's a beautiful city within itself. Nashville's a really beautiful city.
Well, it's grown so much too. But as I was thinking about America, one of the things that has made America great, Jim, is that God has blessed our people with incredible creative abilities. And you think about it, you have Orville and Wilbur Wright, right, North Carolina. Kitty Hawk is where all of this was, ground zero for the aviation phenomenon that took over the world. What's so interesting is, one had 3 years of high school, the other had 4 years of high school, but they obviously were tenacious, they were gifted, they didn't give up, and out of that grew the first motorized flight, and then from there, everything just really, really took over. Now, what's interesting, too, is that one, of course, I think it was Wilbur, died young of typhoid fever, and Orville died of a heart attack, but not before they left their impressions on the world as America once again reflected just the tremendous creativity that is so much a part of the warp and woof and the fabric of what our country is all about. And I grew up in an aviation family. My father, was from Buffalo, New York. He was actually born in New York City. His dad was the divisional commander for the Salvation Army, and also the head of the Salvation Army staff band. The Salvation Army, of course, is known for its bands and the like. And my father, Jim, actually had a pilot's license before he had a driver's license.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so there wasn't a United States Air Force Academy, back then, so he went to something called Air Cadets, and he was in the class of 1953G, and they flew T-28s, which was a single wing aircraft with a big engine, and then after that had a commission in the Air Force, and then flew for American Airlines, and was involved in a pilot strike, and as a scab pilot, meaning he broke the union line with the Airline Pilots Association, he started to fly for Southern Airways, which is obviously a long ago defunct airline. I think they merged with Republic to form Northwest, which ended up merging or being acquired by Delta. And that's how we ended up living in Louisiana, because Southern Airways was where he flew out of. And I remember as a little boy, just reflecting on aviation, I remember as a little boy, my mother taking our car and driving out onto the tarmac and waiting for my dad to park his Convair, his Southern Airways Convair, and walk down the steps, and he would get in the car and drive us home to Laplace, Louisiana, which was in one of the parishes there close to New Orleans. And then during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was recalled to active duty in the Air Force and ended up flying the C-130s, and that's what took him on a tour over to Southeast Asia. And what we learned after he passed away early in his 60s, what we learned is that he was in northern Thailand, Jim, and there were some parts of his service record that were blacked out or expunged, and it appears he may have been part of what was, at the time, illegal war that the United States was fighting in Laos and Cambodia with C-119s mostly that had no markings on them, and it was some covert activity that was taking place over there. So, and then in high school, at Warwick High School, just continuing the theme of aviation, I pursued an appointment to the Air Force Academy and did receive a Senate appointment when I lived in Virginia, and made a decision to turn that down, much to my dad's chagrin. And then the children's mother was a flight attendant for Northwest, so all of our children flew early and often. And so, sitting here at an airport, I was just reflecting on aviation and just the seminal role it's played in my life through the years.
As you were talking about pilots and airplanes, I couldn't help but think of my dear departed friend O.A. Fish, just recently departed here.
Yeah.
Many years flew for Eastern Airlines and has a great stories to tell. And matter of fact, he was in the air flying when the Challenger exploded. And he was able to see that explosion in the sky here. So every time I hear somebody talk about pilots, I think of dear O.A. Fish, dear friend.
Yes. Yeah, and we certainly will miss him in the county.
Yes.
We'll miss him, and I think he flew for Eastern Airlines,
he did,
if
right.
I remember correctly. And, Jim, I was also thinking, today's going to be an aviation theme. I think you and I just decided that, or maybe I did unilaterally, and you just pleasantly went along with it. But in any event, I've been going out here recently to connect with Rick out there at the Rutherfordton Airport, who's got I think it's called like Hangar 57 or something like that. It's got a great food, hamburgers and cheeseburgers and chicken sandwiches and the like. Hey, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, oh yes. People fly in from hundreds of miles away to have lunch there.
He told me, Jim, that he's got over 400 customers, and interestingly enough, of course, now we've got about a 5,000-foot runway out at the Rutherfordton Airport, about 5,000 feet, and so they're able to put, corporate jets and others there. I think they've added or built a couple of new hangars, and interestingly enough, he said that because of fuel prices in the past and the ability to gas yourself there, self-serve, that a lot of folks will make Rutherfordton Airport an intermediate stop on their way to different places.
I've heard that. That's amazing, isn't it? Right here in good old Rutherford County.
Well, and it's hard to believe that it's true, but it is. And I'd like to go out there. If folks have never gone out there before, make it a point to go out and just say hello to the relatively new airport manager and a couple other folks there that are very pleasant. And just outside the little check-in area are two rocking chairs, and you could right facing the runway, And you can sit there in the rocking chairs, and there's a speaker that's attached to the outside roof, and you can listen to the chatter between not the tower, but the fixed-based operation and the folks that are coming in. It's just a real pleasant getaway. You can grab something to eat. Actually, Our State magazine, I think at one point featured the cheeseburger that Rick had there, and he's got lots of memorabilia. And if you ask him, he'll also tell you about some of his archaeological work that he's done in the county. Jim, it's incredible. He has found, he won't tell me where it is, although he did say some construction got near the secret spot. He has found some like ancient Native American arrow-making pits where he digs down and finds arrowheads. He's got a collection right there that you can see. And he's like an amateur archaeologist, and he and I are talking about the possibility of going out and doing a dig at some point. So, everywhere you go in our county, there are interesting little bits of history, aren't there?
There really are, and unfortunately, so many folks ignore that. But I'm really pleased to know about some of the history. I'm learning it all along as I go. And that Beckler Mint up the road here from us, not too far, is an interesting story as well.
Right. And he's got a little glass case, and if you go in there, yeah, very affordable. If you go in there, grab something to eat, and as you do that, if you ask him, hey, can I see your arrowhead collection? He's got this incredible arrowhead collection. He actually has some stone tools that go back a couple thousand years, and then he's got articles that are up on the wall. Used to be called the Forest City Courier, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and so he's got articles about the airport and growth. It's just really interesting. It's a little snap back in time when you go there and grab something great to eat. Great place to bring the children. Little field that's right there, and I even thought it's a great field trip for school children. So, but, and I was also thinking, Jim, about some memorable flights that I've had in my life, and in our remaining time, I thought I'd talk about a couple of those.
Sure.
I remember that one of the first times that I went to Russia, and this would have been in the late 80s, and Aeroflot, which is the national airline, of course, they're really starving right now because of the embargo on parts and the like, but Aeroflot had these Tupolev 144s and 154s, and the pilots for Aeroflot were mostly, almost exclusively, former Soviet Air Force pilots. And so, Jim, there were zero creature comforts. They would take the plane off like it was a rocket, and they would make steep banks like they were doing a strafing run on the enemy. And I remember a flight that I took one time to Yakutia, which is actually inside the Arctic Circle. It's a place where the permafrost on the ground is so hard that they have to put the pipes up above the ground, and it just looks absolutely surreal. And before we flew from Chelyabinsk, which is a very polluted city, and of course the former Soviet Union, so much was monochromatic. It was gray, it was dark, it was drab, and it was depressing. But before we got on the flight, Jim, we walked out on the tarmac, walked up the steps, and I noticed that they were loading 50-gallon drums of petrol up underneath where the baggage was. They were putting actually fuel in 50-gallon drums. No safety considerations at all. Yeah. I got on the flight, sat on my seat. My seat was broken. It went all the way back. The seat belt did not work, so I had no seat belt on the 2.5-hour flight. And they had so much baggage, they just went ahead and piled up all the baggage in the exits of the airplane. What they lacked in avionics, meaning technology, they had 5 pilots and co-pilots and engineers up in the front, and sadly, the former Soviet Union was known and still has been known for its safety problems through the years. And so I remember praying a lot on that flight as we flew up there to Yakutia. Remember another time going into Hong Kong for the first time, and the old Hong Kong airport actually was one where the final approach would have you, Jim, flying through what was essentially the downtown. So you look out to the left and you look out to the right, and you can see buildings with people. It was pretty incredible. And then, of course, there have been other incidents along the way. I remember once on a Northwest Airlines flight out over the Pacific, somebody had in business class had a massive heart attack and died. And we were out over the point of no return, and it was about 3.5 hours into Tokyo still. So they just took his, sadly, took his body and put it in where the flight attendants take their rest time. And I just think through the years there have been all kinds of just stories that you see, and a lot of generosity that you see along the way. I used to travel, Jim, with our 4 children when they were young, and Tammy, my former wife, my ex-wife, would be flying somewhere in the world on one of her trips as a flight attendant. And one of the things I would do, Jim, I would have my computer bag over one shoulder, a diaper bag over the other shoulder, have the 4 children, I'd be herding them like a sheepdog, and I would just make sure that I looked pitiful, because I always knew there'd be some grandmother on the flight that would help me out, or somebody that always wanted children. So I would just make it a point to be as pitiful as I was, trying to do the best that I could in the moment.
Funny story. My first experience flying was not too good. I was going into the Air Force, and we left Greenville, Spartanburg, and flew into Dallas, Texas, or Houston. I can't remember, one of the two, and for the first leg. Then we had to change planes there and get on a smaller flight to fly over into San Antonio, Texas, for Lackland Air Force Base. We got on an old plane. It was an old one, and we started out the runway and stopped, and they said, we have to go back. They have a little technical problem. I thought, this is one of my first flights in an airplane. So we sat in the plane there for 30, 45 minutes. All right, we're ready to go now. They taxied it out again. And for the second time, they said, well, we have not gotten that fixed yet. We're going to have to pull back in. So I think about 3 different times they were having technical problems. I thought, they're going to fly us to San Antonio, Texas on this plane. They can't even get adjusted right. Finally, we made the flight.
Oh, no.
It was not a really calming experience. Me going into the service for the first time, being away from my home and family, I didn't know what to expect, but that was not a good experience.
Oh, and there's so many people that are fearful to fly. Of course, it says in the Scripture, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. Jim, I remember one time I was flying. I think it was called Rocky Mountain Air, and you get the thermals coming off the mountains, which is essentially like a washing machine of the wind, and you just buff it about. And I was on this commuter flight. It was a prop plane, and we were bouncing up and down, and then all of a sudden it's a yaw, which is side to side, where you're swinging from side to side. And the woman next to me, I didn't know her. She looked over at me, Jim, and she said, "May I hold you?" And this woman I didn't know threw her arms around me because she wanted to be comforted. And I thought, okay, well, it's I guess this is ministry. And but some folks are just so deathly afraid to fly, and that's not one of the things that I've dealt with. So I just try to encourage people as much as possible. And I've had a number of mechanical things through the years. Coming back from Hawaii one time on a DC-10, the engine that's up in the tail, people will remember the DC-10. It's got three engines. The L-1011 did as well. But that engine blew, and it was a big bang, and we had to descend in altitude. And, they gave us all the instructions about preparing and this, that, and the other. And it's interesting how a lot of people find religion in that moment. And that's why a relationship is so important. It doesn't matter what we face. Whatever we face, we know that if we're born again, God's going to be there with us, and he's going to give us the comfort that we need. But think about all the training too that pilots have, and it's just really something. And it all started with Wilbur and Orville Wright, who in North Carolina creatively envisioned the possibility of people flying. Isn't that something?
That's something to be proud of in North Carolina. Many of the tags in North Carolina say that first in flight. That's on the North Carolina car tags. So that's a remembrance that we should be proud of in North Carolina. Right here in good old North Carolina, we have the founding of the airplane.
Exactly. And, Jim, as we end here the next 5 minutes, one thing that has also struck me is, through the pandemic, there were all the issues of masks, and I'm looking at about a third of the people wearing masks now. There isn't a federal mask mandate anymore for flights. It's really kind of interesting because I will say this: when you get on an airplane, sometimes folks with masks will look at you if you're not wearing one, like you're a public health nuisance. And our culture in our country, unfortunately, has become so angry and disconnected from each other, and almost as if there's a spirit in the country wanting to divide us. And it's the sad reality that as a nation, often we need a common crisis to bring us all together. In the weeks following 9/11, actually the months, it was about 12 weeks after 9/11, church attendance was through the roof. Yes. Why? Because people felt the stab in the heart of the nation, and we came together and recognized we need God, we need Jesus, we need hope, we need answers, we need to come together. But it's so sad to me, Jim, that so often it's only when there's some kind of major disaster like this that we can recognize, look, we have differences, but we're better together than we are apart. Don't you think?
That's absolutely correct. We should rejoice in our blessings, not just in our fears.
Right. And so, as we look at the cauldron, the bubbling cauldron politically that we're in, where people are so quick to dismiss, so quick to be angry, so quick to have invectives and polemics and just be acerbic and caustic and nasty, common grace and civility and kindness and love and mercy gets mortgaged, gets aborted in the process. And I have people that I disagree with severely on matters that I consider to be deep biblical convictions. But I'm not going to be nasty to them. I'm not going to be angry. Why? Because the living God, through his son Jesus, made it clear they will know we are Christians by our love. People will never learn. People will never consider the possibility of changing, Jim, unless they know they're respected, appreciated, and loved. And so I'm sometimes asked, how in the world can you have relationships with these people in the county and elsewhere with whom you disagree so vehemently? And the answer is in the spirit of Acts chapter 17, when the Apostle Paul went to Mars Hill, the Areopagus. He was wanting to understand the yearnings of people. Why? So that he could say, I see that you have a monument to the unknown God. That unknown God is the one I'm going to declare to you right now. We have got to be in the world, but not of it, Jim. And that's the purpose of my and passion of my life, and I know it is yours too.
Absolutely, and it is very meaningful to find somebody like yourself who believes very strongly in that, and you're not deterred by the distractions of hatred, not deterred by the distractions of differences of opinion. You just right there, love people, and be a friend to them.
Well, Jim, as we end here, I just want to say this. There's tremendous freedom for any of us when we realize we live life with the need to be accountable for it someday, and we actually live our lives only for the pleasure to an audience of one, and that's Jesus. One day we'll stand before him, give an account for every thought, word, and deed. So let's make America great today by making sure that our heart is right. Go to Jesus. He'll be there.
You have a safe flight, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you for joining us for My Great America with Jim and Butch. Join us each Tuesday and Thursday morning at 9:05 for this enlightening program on 100.9 FM and 590 AM. It's My Great America with Jim and Butch.